When someone tells you that you're in the last stages of a disease, you know you're in trouble, big trouble. But I want to share with you the story of a man who was told this about his diabetes. He struggled with diabetes for 11 years and it just got worse and worse and worse. And yet once he was told that he was in the last stages with an A1C over 14, he did something about it. And in 6 short months, he saw amazing victory.
Okay, this man says, I was diagnosed with diabetes 11 years ago. That's interesting. 11 years is a long time to be diabetic. He says, I've been on insulin and Victoza. March 2019 had an A1C of 14.7. So, he's been a diabetic for 11 years, hasn't had any control whatsoever over it. He's just getting worse, up to 14.7, just about as high as an A1C can go. He said, my blood sugar was at 576 milligrams per deciliter. The doctor at the Mayo Clinic put me on fast-acting insulin. In addition to what I was already taking, the endocrinologist told me I was in the last stages of that disease of diabetes. Wow. That's pretty heavy. Someone to tell you, well, you're in the very last stages. In other words, you're not long for this world. And he said, I'll have to take insulin for the rest of my life, presumably the rest of my short life, the way this guy was talking. And the guy says, well, I was upset. Well, I would be too. And I started listening to Dr. Fung and you, Dr. Pollock. Well, I appreciate the honorary doctorate, but I am no doctor, believe me. I'm a lowly preacher and a Bible teacher and a writer. But anyway, he said, I started listening to Dr. Fung and you. Today, my A1C is 6.1. Did you get that? 6.1. He was at 14.7. Now he's down to 6.1. The endocrinologist is saying you're in the last stages. This is it. Get your affairs in line. And now he's at 6.1. He says a theoretical 5.7. Not sure exactly what that would mean, but I suppose it means based on his glucose readings he's getting these days, he should be at 5.7 pretty soon. I lost 50 pounds. I was told not to go back to the endocrinologist for at least 6 months. Thanks and blessings. I never get tired of hearing these wonderful reports. And that's why when my critics come against me, and believe me, they do, and tell me I'm all washed up and I don't have a clue and I have no business even advising people and my ideas are completely wrong and this isn't really reversing diabetes, this is just avoiding it, and all the things people say, I think back to some of these amazing reports and it's like, sorry, you're not going to throw any rain on my parade. I'm going to enjoy these wonderful reports. I know good is happening, and I just keep getting them by the tens, by the hundreds, and I suspect if I added them all up, it would be into the thousands. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. He's told that his A1C is 6.1. It had been 14.7. The endocrinologist is saying, this is it. You're at the very end of diabetes. Okay, here's another short little comment that I thought was worth relaying to you. He says, I also discovered I was a grazer because I'm a truck driver. Thank God for the truck drivers. He says, I would graze all day long until I saw your video. I stopped, and my glucose came right down. Thanks again. Love it. Love it. Sometimes it takes different things for us to get our glucose under control, and it can be different for different people. But in this man's case, the big thing apparently he did more than anything else that he attributes to his success is he just simply stopped grazing. And by grazing, what we're talking about is just eating, all day long, a little bit here, a little bit there. You're keeping your insulin high. You're keeping your blood sugar high. It never has a chance to settle down. And of course, that's the beauty of what is known as intermittent fasting. I prefer to call it time-restricted eating, or simply disciplined eating, but basically it means you don't snack, hardly at all, and then sometimes you'll just compress your eating into maybe a shorter window of 6 or 8 hours out of the day, and the rest of the time you don't eat at all. And this guy started doing that, and blood sugar came right down. Some of you, that may be all it'll take, along with maybe the simple reality of you just can't eat sugary stuff anymore. For others, it'll take more than that, but for him, that's all it took, and that's awesome. This person says, Dennis, you saved my life. Went into the doctor of December 2018 for a foot ulcer that wouldn't heal. They poked me to see if I was diabetic, got a blood glucose of 255, A1C of 9.4. Well, of course, we just read about some that were higher, but still 9.4 is not good. And keep this in mind, folks, when your A1C is that high or in the 8s or really in the 7s, you're damaging yourself every day. You don't feel it, and it's not like you can look into your body and see what's going on. Obviously, you can't. But you're harming yourself every day, and eventually you'll pay the price. Some people can maintain it for some years. Others, it'll just be a matter of months before they start seeing some what we call diabetic complications, the foot pain, blurry vision, and even more serious problems than those. So he says, my wife and I went on a low-carb diet after watching several of your videos. Well, here it is, August 18th, 2019. I've lost 40 pounds, and so many of these people report weight loss, and yet most of them are not even trying to lose weight. They're just going low carb. He says, I've lost 40 pounds. My A1C, are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? He had an A1C of 9.4. He says, now my A1C is down to 4.9. When you get into the fourth, and he's doing better than me, you know, I'm supposed to be the mentor. Sometimes my mentees are the people that kind of learn a few things from me. They end up doing better than me. I don't know that I've ever been in the 4s. I'm hanging out in the low 5s for my A1C, but this guy went down to 4.9. He says, thanks for all the helpful hints, the new recipes we've tried and loved. Well, if nothing else, learning of these different individuals should give you hope. Some of you need it so desperately. Some of you are depressed, you're miserable, you wonder if there's any answers, and I'm here to tell you there are answers for you. You can make it. You can do it. You can see victory over diabetes. Okay, another comment. I know diabetes is hereditary and weight-related. Well, the tendency toward diabetes is definitely hereditary, and there is a relationship with weight. So this person says, I changed my life last year, got a score of A1C 5.4, now trying to learn to maintain. The key point, as you explain, is you can't eat the sugar and carbs every day like a normal person. Well, he's right. You can't eat the sugar and carbs like a normal person, but let me give you a little secret. Those normal people that are eating the sugar and carbs, they're eating an abnormal diet, and they are damaging their body. And there are some people who are insulin resistant who are hurting themselves. Their blood glucose never quite gets up to diabetic levels, but then they end up with a heart attack. They end up with stroke, all kinds of other medical issues, because metabolic syndrome can manifest in several different ways. High blood pressure, strokes, cardiovascular issues. They're all coming from the same root, which is insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. So when he says you can't eat like normal people, well, those normal people aren't eating right anyway. It kind of bugs me. Sometimes people say, well, if you can't eat a normal American diet, you haven't really, and keep your blood glucose low. If you can't do that, you haven't really reversed it. Who in the world ever told you that the American diet is normal? It is distinctly abnormal. It is wrong. It is unhealthy. It is unnatural. And it is completely contrary to the way men and women have eaten for thousands and thousands of years. Stuffing yourselves with bagels and pretzels and ice cream and all the sweets that people eat, not only in America, but in India, in England, in Canada, and all over the world, really. Sad to say, America has exported her miserable, wretched, unhealthy, abnormal diet to the whole world. And now practically the whole world is eating wrong. So for someone to come along and say, well, you haven't really reversed your diabetes unless you can go back to eating that way that you used to. Well, whoever told you that way you used to was right? These people are hurting themselves. So anyway, excuse me for preaching, but what do you expect when you have a preacher talking to you? He says, I feel worse anyways when I do. He says, I'm not saying I don't have a treat or a treat day once in a while. I get right back to what is mandatory to stay off the metformin, keep going lower with my A1C. By the way, he says, my health numbers were fantastic. Triglycerides went from 384, dangerously high, to 134. So much better. And folks, I've never heard of anybody going low carb that didn't lower their triglycerides. Even Joel Fuhrman, who is essentially a modified vegan, admits that if you do high carb, it's not going to help your triglycerides. Every single person I've ever heard, I don't think it's hardly possible to go low carb and have your triglycerides rise. If you've been eating a standard American diet or you've been eating a high carb diet and you go low carb, almost certainly your triglycerides will go down. And it's a strange phenomenon, I know, because triglycerides have to do with fat in the blood. And you would think if you're eating more fat, your fat in the blood would increase. But for whatever reason, and there are reasons for it, but I'm not going to go into that now, and I don't know all those reasons, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work that way. The more fat you eat, the lower carbs you eat, the more this triglyceride measure, which is fat in the blood, goes down, down, down. So his went from 384 to 134. Blood pressure better than ever. Weight loss 2 sizes down, still working on it. Great advice, Dennis. Intermittent fasting and low-carb, high-fat diet is my life plan now. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I just thank God for these wonderful reports, and there are just so many. I couldn't possibly share them all, but I try to share a few here and there just to let you know this stuff works, and we are getting report after report about that.